Thank you. Okay, so we've noted that. Thank you. That brings us on to item 5, and I think at this point Councillor Stowe will leave the room.
I'll see you later.
Yes. So, we now have item 5A. This is application 319-0118 OUT. This is a hybrid planning application for 1, planning permission for construction of the Spine Road, site accesses, drainage infrastructure and ancillary works, and 2, outline planning permission for the erection of up to 618 homes, primary and preschool, up to 1 80-bed care home and up to 50 assisted living homes, C2 use, neighbourhood hub comprising shops, up to 658 square metres of A1 to A5 uses, community facilities, up to 400 square metres of D1 use, travelling show people site, public open space, landscaping, drainage, infrastructure, all associated and ancillary development at land east of Stevenage off Gresley Way, Stevenage. And this is generally known as the East of Stevenage application. And the papers for this commence at page 23 of the pack. If I can find my correct piece of paper. I do, yes. I think we will start with the officer presentation. If I could ask, please, for the officer presentation from Jenny Pearson to explain to us your thinking in relation to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as Councillor Deering has read out the description, we'll just move on to the next slide. So, the slide on your left indicates the site area. This covers the outline application, the outline element of the scheme. The slide on the right shows the area of the application site, which is covered in the detailed aspect of the proposal, which is for the Spine Road, the accesses and the drainage areas associated with the Spine Road. So, whilst you're not being asked to determine the detail of the wider scheme layout and design, the application does provide an illustrative layout and landscape strategy. This is to give an idea of how the proposed quantum and land uses can be accommodated within the site within a landscape-led approach to layout and site structure in accordance with the district plan policies. Following the initial round of consultation, discussions with the steering group for the master planning sessions and the Highway Authority, amendments were proposed to the scheme. The main focus of the amendments was the conversion of the central access from all modes access to a bus-only egress from the site. This means no vehicles can enter the site using this junction and only buses can leave the site. This is at the junction with the White Way on Gresley Way. The 3 junctions will be signal controlled and will operate with vehicle detection that will enable traffic signals to optimise themselves. Typically during peak periods this will mean that the junction will operate with a cycle. However, outside peak times the traffic signals will give green time to the arms where demand is present rather than cycle through each arm of the junction, potentially giving green time where there is no demand requesting. This means that Gresley Way would in fact stay green if there is no demand on other arms of the junction. Furthermore, the signals will operate with scoot technology, which means that cars should not get held at each junction along Gresley Way, and buses would trigger a green signal on their approach. This slide shows that the intention of the site is to come forward in 3 parcels. This means that 3 developers plus registered providers could be on site simultaneously in order to get to the critical mass required to support the provision of community facilities such as the primary school and shops, far sooner than if a site was to develop over a number of consecutive phases. There are a number of late representations and 2 officer amendments to the report, and these are presented in the schedule of late reps that members have available. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, very much indeed. I think we will now call upon the public speakers. We have 1 speaker against and 1 speaker for this application. Peter, who we call first?
Speaker against.
So against. So I'd like firstly to call to speak against this application Mr. Stephen Sopola. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Thank you. You will have 6 minutes to speak, Mr. Sipila, and as I think you may know, the timing starts from when you press the button and the little red light comes on the microphone.
Well, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. I do so as the community representative for the on the East of Stevenage Masterplanning Steering Group, representing interests on both sides of the East Herts and Stevenage boundaries. This address is supported by the local MP, Mr. Stephen McPartland, the Aston and Walkham parishes, Parish Councils, I should say. It also enjoys cross-party support from councillors in the Manor and Chels wards of Stevenage. I'd first like to congratulate Jenny Pearce, the case officer, and her colleagues on her report. It addresses many of the issues, but it also raises others which I'm sure will be addressed here tonight. This representation looks not, however, at the technical content of the report, but the process which it and the planning application have been framed. We note that the Council continues to report an excess of supply of homes, currently some 765. That's 12% more than its current 5-year housing requirement. We look to the Council and the developers to actively collaborate and positively engage local community interests, embody comprehensive placemaking principles, use of design codes and design review, and to facilitate development plans which fully accord to its policies and thereby demonstrate least harm. Hitherto, this has not been the case. We therefore ask you, as a committee, to defer this planning application on the following grounds. First, the applicant has failed proactively and therefore effectively to engage local communities. By submitting a hybrid application with its focus solely on the road layout, the applicant has precluded and preempted meaningful engagement of residents in a comprehensive and collaborative placemaking opportunity. The applicant's engagement has been minimal. It has neither satisfied the spirit or intent of policy DES1. Its engagement was limited to formal exhibitions and attendance at a general residents' meeting. Despite constructive feedback, it has chosen not to publicly address residents' concerns. The lack of visibility and engagement by the applicant contrasts starkly with other developers, notably in Ware, which has proactively engaged their public in developing a community-focused master plan and a holistic planning application by using public workshops, focus groups and more. Not surprisingly, residents, particularly those in the Chels and the Manor wards of Stevenage, feel they've been ignored and have no sense of ownership of this very much developer-led plan. I now turn to matters concerning the relevance of the master planning process, I should say, as it affects this application. We point out in our written representations that just 2 meetings of the Masterplanning Steering Group were held between the first hastily convened meeting in May 2018 and, in our view, the premature adoption of the developer's master plan vision broadly as its own master plan in September 2018. Critically, a 3rd meeting to discuss highway matters, a meeting which would have informed both the master plan and indeed this planning application, was cancelled. As a result, Hertfordshire Highways has been precluded from examining reasoned engineering alternatives proposed during the consultation period. Not surprisingly, there is widely held view that premature adoption of Pigeon's master plan has rendered East Herts District Council's public consultation a tick box exercise, ineffective and of questionable relevance to this whole planning process. The Council's master planning policy, DES1, looks to be an iterative process that looks to control effective planning management of larger sites. It is clear from the report, and indeed from Hertfordshire Highways' response to a recent Freedom of Information request, that the current master plan requires updating to conform with the Council's policy, as it lacks sufficient detail to effectively manage this site, which we now understand is to be built by 3 independent developers. To sum up, the earlier rationale for having separate entrances to facilitate 3 development parcels needed to meet the district plan's first 5-year housing requirement is no longer relevant. It's no longer relevant. The application is defective when judged against the Council's own adopted policies. and the master plan needs to be formally revisited prior to any planning application being considered. Members of the committee, we have one opportunity to get this right. The Council's latest 5-year land supply position statement indicates that if it takes another year or so to do, the Council will still have sufficient housing supply to achieve that and meet its district plan targets. We encourage you, therefore, to modify the case officer's recommendation. In conclusion, we request the committee to defer this application. That will enable the applicant to consult and more effectively collaborate with the local community as part of a comprehensive placemaking opportunity to produce a modified acceptable application. An application which all can acknowledge creates quality developments the Council espouses, and one which generates least harm for residents and those using the local highway network. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Pretty good timing. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is a speaker in favour of this application, and this is Mr. Rob Snowling. And again, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Thank you. You also will have 6 minutes, and it's exactly the same. It starts from when you press the button and the red light comes on.
Thank you, Chairman and members, for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Rob Snowling, and I'm Pigeon's Associate Director with responsibility for this scheme. Our application seeks permission for the creation of a new sustainable community, as has just been described to you in the case officer's presentation. The scheme has been carefully designed to create a high-quality, landscape-led and sustainable neighbourhood complying with the key design principles set out within the East Herts District Plan and the adopted East of Stevenage Masterplan vision. The scheme has been developed in conjunction with the East of Stevenage Steering Group, which includes officers, local ward members, parish council representatives and PACE, and has been the subject of extensive community engagement during the local plan preparation, the master planning process and the current planning application, responding positively to feedback received during the application, with proposed application amendments brought forward as agreed with the county, district and borough council officers. The scheme is based upon a thorough and comprehensive assessment of the site's opportunities. It is landscape-led and establishes a landscape framework for the site that incorporates existing features whilst providing extensive new planting and biodiversity enhancements throughout, resulting in a net gain in biodiversity. Key elements of the scheme include a tree-lined central spine road that will loop through the site, linking key nodal points and open spaces, and a comprehensive green space network of 12 hectares, around 1/3 of the site, creating significant areas of public amenity space for walking, running, dog walking, cycling and recreation. At the heart of the new community will be the new neighbourhood hub, which has been designed to create a vibrant, multi-generational focal point for the scheme, taking its lead from the Stevenage neighbourhood model. Located around a central open space, including an equipped play hub, the mix of uses will create a multi-generational mixed-use meeting place that will be able to host community events and ensure that there is a strong sense of community. The hub will provide local shops to meet day-to-day needs of local residents, a care home and assisted living homes providing specialist accommodation to meet the needs of an ageing population, a primary school and preschool, and a community building to provide a multi-purpose space for the new community. The scheme has been configured to provide 3 parcels, each served with independent requisite infrastructure, and includes full details for the central spine road, accesses and drainage infrastructure to enable its early delivery in accordance with the district plan. By enabling the scheme to come forward as 3 parcels, our expectation is that it will almost halve the delivery time for the scheme, which means that the community facilities can be up and running much sooner, thereby creating a sense of community at an early stage. Whilst the parcels have been designed to come forward independently, the site-wide green infrastructure will be managed by the Land Trust, an organisation that specialises in enhancing the sense of place through community-based management. All new homes will include a dwelling-centric fabric-first approach, which locks in carbon savings for the life of the building, with opportunities to achieve further carbon savings through renewable energy technologies such as solar PV and air source heat pumps being specified through their detailed design. Provision will also be made for electric vehicle charging points in accordance with the district plan, and buildings will seek to minimise the use of mains water through water-saving measures such as water-efficient appliances and rainwater harvesting. The scheme includes a comprehensive package of sustainable transport measures that have been developed collaboratively with the county, district and borough councils. Each of the three main site accesses, which are submitted in detail, will provide two crossing facilities to enable pedestrians and cyclists to cross Gresley Way and connect into the existing Stevenage cycleway via a new pedestrian cycleway along Gresley Way. In addition, crossing facilities will be provided opposite Boxfield Green and where right-of-way Aston 4 meets Gresley Way, with a further east-west link provided by the cycle underpass located immediately south of the site. The SB1 bus service will be extended through the site to ensure that all homes in the new neighbourhood hub are well served by public transport. And responding positively to feedback received during the course of the application, the scheme has been revised so that the central access will become a bus-only egress onto Gresley Way in order to encourage new residents to travel by bus. This effectively means that the site will be served by two vehicular accesses, the minimum required by highways to serve a scheme of this size. The provision of traffic signal control junctions fitted with detectors means that bus movements as well as pedestrian and cycle movements can be prioritised over cars. This has been a key factor in the decision to provide traffic signals rather than roundabouts, which do not offer the same benefits in terms of prioritising sustainable transport. In addition, the traffic signals will be optimised and will work in sync so there's minimal impacts along Gresley Way. Notwithstanding the scheme's highly sustainable location, extensive transport modelling has been undertaken, assuming a worst-case scenario without any allowance for an increased uptake of sustainable transport modes. This demonstrates that all junctions will continue to operate within capacity with the exception of the A602 junction, where a contribution will be made towards the full cost of an improvement scheme, despite there being only a marginal increase in the forecast capacity of the junction. Responding to points raised by PACE would point out that there has been engagement with the local community throughout, with consultation held in respect of the local plan, the master plan, as well as the current application, including engagement events held in 2018 and 2019, where over 6,000 residents were invited on each occasion. There have also been steering group meetings at all key stages during the design process, including a meeting on the 17th of October that was attended by a representative from PACE and was held to discuss highways matters in particular. All of the issues that have been raised by third parties, including those raised by PACE, have been fully considered, and whilst these may have been addressed in a different way to the one being suggested by PACE, where it has been determined through discussion with county, district and borough officers that changes needed to be made, then these have been brought forward in the manner that has been deemed most appropriate through discussions with officers. In conclusion, we firmly believe that the scheme that is before members will deliver a high quality, sustainable
regarding the lack of meaningful engagement with the local community, and particularly the master planning process. This started in May 2018 with an objective to meet every 4 to 6 weeks. So far we've had 3 meetings, not the 15 or so that we would have expected. We've already noted that the Parish Council is opposed to the whole development, but having accepted that it is going ahead, we wish steps to be taken to mitigate the impact on the rest of Aston. Our main area of concern are the country lanes in Aston End, particularly Lanterns Lane. We've already approached Herts Highways on the existing rat running problem, and their view is that restrictions on Lanterns Lane may not be desirable or workable in practice. They go on to say that should the development gain planning permission, it could be reviewed, but the current position is not to place any restrictions on the use of Lanterns Lane. Throughout the planning process, we've raised this with Pigeon. A report in November from their transport consultants describes Lanterns Lane as a narrow country lane with long sections of single track and passing places. The quality of the road finish and the high tree-lined banks are not conducive to high traffic volumes. They also state that based on their review and local knowledge, it's reasonable to assume that Lanterns Lane is not seen as a viable alternative to Gresley Way and the A602. They have chosen not to consult the parish council. 3 of our councillors live on the route and experience traffic problems on a daily basis. To test this theory, we've used Google Maps to help us to predict routes and journey times between the east of Stevenage site and Heathmount School at Watton. At quiet times, the journey via Gresley Way and A602 takes 11 minutes. The alternative route given by Google, Lanterns Lane, Brookfield Lane to the Walken Road, is 0.8 of a mile shorter, but 2 minutes longer. However, between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m, as congestion builds on Gresley Way, the journey time extends and the Lanterns Lane route becomes several minutes quicker. In fact, this morning, Lanterns Lane was the quickest route from 7:14 a.m. until 8:29, peaking at a time saving of 14 minutes at 7:50 a.m. over the Gresley Way A602. And for a 45-minute period, Lanterns Lane was shown as the recommended route. Are the consultants saying that all drivers will reject the shorter, quicker route that is clearly displayed on their sat-nav? The consultants do note that traffic flows on Lanterns Lane without the new development are predicted to be 86 vehicles in the morning peak hour and 127 in the evening. Our view is that this is very heavy for a narrow country lane, and the majority is not village traffic. These are drivers trying to avoid the congestion by cutting through the lanes. The consultants also say that the impact of the new development will add only 2 cars in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. There is no doubt in our mind that the extra cars from over 600 new houses will add to the congestion on Gresley Way. As it becomes increasingly congested, more drivers will opt for the country lanes. In fact, this is clearly demonstrated whenever there is a major incident on the A602. Within a very short time, the village and surrounding lanes quickly become gridlocked by drivers consulting their sat-navs. In conclusion, Aston Parish Council believes strongly that east of Stevenage traffic data seriously underestimates the potential increase in traffic flow into Lanterns Lane. This is because the analysis does not recognise that the A602 is at or over capacity at peak times, and as a result, congestion can build up very quickly, impacting all roads connected to it. Our research into sat-nav recommendations show that Lanterns Lane is frequently recommended as the fastest and suggested route. Aston End residents regularly see 100 or more vehicles per hour. We therefore believe it is essential that the developer measures accurately traffic flows in Lanterns Lane prior to development starting, and puts in place monitoring throughout the development and after full occupation. This data will establish whether or not there is a traffic problem connected to the east of Stevenage. Section 106 money should be set aside to implement appropriate traffic mitigation measures should the data show that action is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. I'm sure members may have some questions. I suspect you also might want some further input from officers. Some points have arisen there. But maybe we'll start with the floor. I can see Councillor Ruffles' hand. Did I see your hand, Councillor Higgins? Yes. And Councillor Andrews. Take those 3.
Well, certainly I'm sure members will want to understand a bit more of the Highways view about the Lanterns Lane question, so I won't go there at the moment. May I just ask one very simple one and then give notice of a slightly more involved one, but not very, and that is the planning history comment in our papers where we're told that there is no relevant planning history for the site, and I assume that the word relevant is important there, but could we just tidy that up, because on the face of it does look a little bit, it looks wrong. And the other matter that I would want to come back to, but perhaps not immediately, is the bridleway and the the nature of the bridleway Aston 004, and I'm very interested in what the surfacing will be. We're told it's going to be a green swathed corridor or something through the site, but I'd like to know more, because I do think it's very important that the character of that bridleway is very carefully planned and organised, I suppose, from both ends, the Aston end but also the Stevenage end, because where it crosses Gresley Way into Stevenage into Charles, it's very much a rural bridleway, and I'm conscious of always Stevenage cycleways, which I don't find very attractive, and I know this isn't that, but I would hate it to take any kind of form which in any way resembled the Stevenage pattern of wonderful cycleways.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Given the site being right on our boundary, and having noted the points that are in the report, could officers expand on the consultation with Stevenage and how those conversations have gone? And my second would be the points that we've had tonight about master planning and meetings, and whether officers feel that enough consultation has been done. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps I could lead the charge on Lanterns Lane. Very aware of the situation in Lanterns Lane, and when we did the site visit I was very uncomfortable about that, and I still am. I think it's been understated how challenging it is to actually get up or down Lanterns Lane, and I tried to get through it as in a local context during peak hours, going against the flow, and it is distinctly unpleasant experience, especially at night when it's raining, because it does occasionally rain, and it does occasionally get dark. So I'm very sympathetic to that element of it, and as we have traffic officers here, I'm wondering if Highways can give us an insight into what they might possibly do vis-à-vis Lanterns Lane, were this development to go ahead, because I think the likelihood of 6 cars is more likely to be the likelihood of 66 cars being added to that flow through. And if I may, just one here, I've got on page 67, we're looking at resident bus passes, and as you know there was some conversation around that last week amongst members, and I confess to being disappointed that we're seeing 2 per dwelling. I'm not particularly fussed about that, but only for 3 months. I don't think people would get necessarily into the habit of using the bus on the basis of 3 months, more especially if that were the 3 or 6 months of inclement weather, potentially between October and March, where it's dark in the morning and dark at night. I think breaking the habit of jumping in the car because it's convenient, comfortable, and you're not going to get soaking wet is not going to be stimulated by having a 3-month free bus pass handed to you in November. So I think there might be some work to be done around that. And then going to 8.5 on page 67 and looking at the contribution requested by the NHS, well, firstly, may I salute the NHS for at long last actually coming forward, surfacing, getting some sort of act together and actually coming to get some money, because so often in the past in this chamber we've expressed our frustration that the NHS, who are always claiming that they've got no money, have not come to us when it was their absolute right to have a pick at the pile. But I am confused, because when I look at that, I recognise the Chell surgery, the King George, the Sheppel, to some extent the Bedwell, but then I see Simmons Green. Now, that is the opposite side of Stevenage from this development. So I'm mildly curious, possibly it may not be within officers' writ to deal with that tonight, but I'm mildly curious as to why Simmons Green Centre has come up there when it's right the other side of town. Not exactly sustainable, and probably not reached on the bus that will serve this development. Thank you. Timetables.
No, we're not going there.
Oh. I normally take them in 3s, but I saw your hand go up, Councillor Buckmaster, so yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have a question about the schools. I was very pleased to see that you actually had planned a two-form entry primary school on site, which is hopefully is future-proofing the allocation of pupils. But I was concerned at what stage is this school going to be built? Is it dependent on a certain number of homes occupation? And what secondary school will they be going to, and do the secondary schools have enough places for them? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I know there are more questions looming, but we'll just take these four and then we'll come back to others. Perhaps we could start with, I don't know, Jenny, can we start with you, please? The references to highways and traffic engineers, Jenny.
Chairman, just to add, my question relates to one of the earlier ones. If it's very short...
We'll raise it now, Jeff. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just about the, as Councillor Andrews pointed out, the NHS Section 106 request. And I think I'm right in saying in 8.6, perhaps officers could confirm this, that the request for acute care hasn't been justified, so that's not going ahead. But can you confirm that there is Section 106 for primary care? If that request, the NHS aspect, could be confirmed. Thank you. Or clarified, rather.
Okay, I'm just going to try and hold it there and get some answers. So we can maybe start with Jenny, and there have been references to traffic and highways, obviously, Jenny. I think, as you feel fit, introduce your colleagues and we'll hear from them as well. Yeah, thank you.
So I'll try and take them in order, if I can. So, yes, you're correct, there is history on the site. Obviously, the question is what is relevant. The application that's been noted by one of the representations was 1988 and an appeal heard in 1989. The information is so old it's on microfiche and doesn't appear on our system, and gives you a clue as to whether or not certain things are considered to be relevant. I think the issue of relevance in this particular case is that the planning context of 1988, when I was still at primary school, is very much different to where we are at today. Very much a different government drive. Different local plan, different planning context altogether. So that in that regard, yes, we obviously look at the history of it, and it was raised during the examination in public as well. So the inspector was very much aware at the time of the history, and she didn't raise any questions on it, and it was not considered preclusive to development here and now as we're proposing. So yes, there is a very old application on the site. It will have some relevance, but in this regard, because of the difference in planning context, the very different government drive towards growth and development, it wasn't considered relevant in that context. In terms of the bridleway, yes, we are looking at the surfacing of the bridleway. It is obviously a route which is well used by dog walkers, horse riders. I was having an email conversation with a lady the other evening about the bridleway and the regular use of that. And so there is a condition within the application report which looks at making sure that all routes, public rights of way, bridleways included, are protected throughout the development, protected throughout construction. There's no deviation or diversion of any of the routes proposed. The surfacing and the crossing where it meets Gresley Way will then be subject to further detailed discussions with highways. And I would also propose that at that particular point, when that detail is being discussed, we have a forum with those people that use the route regularly to make sure that the crossing of that junction works for all users. This isn't something which normally happens because it's something which is covered by the rights of way in the Highways Department itself. But in conversation with the lady, I thought it was actually worth getting the local user groups involved in that, particularly horse riders that have a very different need when crossing fast-moving traffic like Gresley Way. In terms of consultation, we have a very close working relationship with Stevenage Borough Council officers. Regular email and face-to-face discussions. We've got the duty to cooperate through local plan work, but also as professionals we just meet regularly and have good chat about what options are, what impacts are, what we need to consider. Stevenage obviously a statutory authority when we consult, so they provided detailed comments to the original application as well, which were then actually subjected to the changes that are now proposed to the scheme. They had a concern that the noise impact assessment, for example, hadn't clearly demonstrated that the existing Stevenage residents had been taken into account. So again, an amendment to that assessment was undertaken. In terms of formal consultation, because of the borough boundary, district boundary, we don't have the address points for Stevenage residents on our system. So we actually had to undertake several weeks' worth of work to borrow the address points from Stevenage Council to make sure that we could capture each and every single one of those within our consultation. So over 500 residents within the Stevenage wards alone were consulted originally, plus Aston and Waltham properties, which we do have the address points of. So we were keen to make sure that a good consultation zone was undertaken, so that the residents who are going to be most likely affected were first and foremost on our minds. In terms of Lanterns Lane, it's probably a good idea now to introduce Hertfordshire Highways colleagues, because it has been subject to a good number of conversations and debates at both steering groups and also as officers. We regularly meet to make sure that we are capturing everything. There was a request directly from Aston Parish Council to the Highways Authority to look again at Lanterns Lane, and a number of options were considered, which Oliver can talk you through now. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jenny. Good evening. My name is Oliver Sowerby from Herts County Council. We've had quite a lot of engagement with Aston Parish Council and also PACE, especially with the matter of Lanterns Lane. As Councillor Andrews alluded to, the route is unpleasant. It's a single track with passing places. It's often dark and raining. When it rains, it is unpleasant, and it's not one I would choose to use. As it's been said, when there is a problem on the A602, Lanterns Lane and Brookfield Lane through Aston and Aston End, it is used as a rat run. However, for general use, given the issues with Lanterns Lane, the alignment, the poor visibility, I would suggest to anyone with local knowledge, as the residents of this site will soon accrue, that they would not wish to use Lanterns Lane as a regular journey. And I also know that Google, while satellite data may show it's quicker, in practice, the route is going to be very slow. The speeds on Lanterns Lane officially it's 30 miles an hour, then Brookfield 60. So you could, in theory, get through it very quickly, but in practice you have to drive very, very slowly, and you have to give way to oncoming cars. So our research and looking at census data suggested that only single digits would actively use Lanterns Lane from the development, so 10 and under, which we don't think is a material impact. As Jenny, the case officer, has put in her report, there is a remedial fund of I think up to £50,000, and there is a provision for monitoring. So this is something we will look very carefully at. And if it's demonstrated that there is a problem, there are things we can do. We don't necessarily want an engineering solution making Lanterns Lane wider, for instance, because that will simply encourage higher vehicle speeds. We could have better signage, for instance, that might help. We could also look at the speed limit on Brookfield Lane, but we don't want physical infrastructure measures, really, such as banned right turns or restrictions into Lanterns Lane because of the effect on the businesses, for instance. And I'm not convinced that will be workable, but our research suggests single digits in terms of traffic flows on Lanterns Lane. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to some of the other questions and points that were raised. Comments have been raised about master planning process. There were quite extensive conversations, and the steering group process has been very intense. The master planning process is a forum for frank and open discussion. There are no holds barred in terms of what people say, how they say it, and so therefore we do get not necessarily a consensus of opinion, but at least an understanding of what things are proposed and why they are proposed. And the developers actually took a lot away from each of those meetings and made amendments with regards to them. There were pre-application master planning sessions, there were pre-application engagement with officers and key stakeholders. There were two exhibitions, one prior to the application being submitted and one after the application was submitted. This was designed and timed specifically so that people could go to the exhibition, see the information in the material, and then make their comments to the case officers. And then there were further two steering group discussions after the application had been submitted, again so that people could then reflect on the material, could reflect on the changes that were being proposed. So the master planning sessions aren't the end of the process. It's always been made clear by the leader of the council that they will continue. And with a site like this, which is mostly an outline, there will obviously be a need to continue to work through the reserve matters and the detailed layout and detail of each of the properties and the design of the buildings and things moving forward. So the master planning doesn't stop. It doesn't get to a point where you say, okay, right, we've done that bit, tick that box and let's move on. It will continue. And it's been very clear that the process will continue through construction even, once people are on site and once people are living there, because it's a steering group of local ward members and local representatives is an ideal location, an ideal forum to be able to air issues and to get resolution where there are issues. In terms of resident bus passes, we have had a discussion with the applicant, and we've also explored whether or not, instead of a time-limited 3-month period, actually whether it's a flexible ticket option. So you get a certain number of journeys. I don't profess to know all the detail of how it would work with the Ariba system in Stevenage, but the idea is then you would have a flexible ticket, which, as you allude to, does give you the option to use the bus as and when, rather than having 3 months and it expires. And all those sorts of details can be then secured for the 106 in consultation with the Highways team, Sustainable Transport team. In terms of the NHS, I think David Snell will talk you through that one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This issue of the NHS has been raised on many occasions by the committee, and you'll be familiar with your officer's advice. If I take you back to paragraph 8.5, you'll see there that the NHS requested contributions of 437,000 ish for improvements to GP practice services, essentially. They also requested, further down that paragraph, a much larger sum for hospital services, essentially, to put it in common language. The problem with the NHS continues, I'm afraid. Your officers are doing your best, but whilst we're able to recommend the GP contributions to you, and you'll see those in the recommendation, we are not able to recommend the pooling of contributions to the wide range of services, acute, mental health, etc., that the NHS would like us to. It's simply not within the regulations, that's the civil regulations, to do that. It's not within our power, and legal services have confirmed that on a number of occasions. What I'm saying also applies to the next application on your agenda, so I'll save repeating myself, but we are happy to recommend the GP improvements to you, subject to your consideration of Councillor Andrews' point about Simmons Green, which I take the point, but it's a matter for members. If they wish that to be removed from the recommendation, that's perfectly within your consideration. But we cannot recommend to you the pooling to wider hospital services. Thank you.
And to touch on the Simmons Green point as well, the NHS response, which is as part of the application material, said that people from this site could reasonably request to be registered with any number of surgeries. I think there was 5 listed within Stevenage, and to their perspective, the catchment is actually quite large, and therefore people have patient choice to choose that, which is why it was listed. But as David says, I think it's quite clear we do have to be reasonable when it comes to 106 contributions and still compliant in that regard. So we can look further again at some of that level of detail when it comes to the Section 106. In terms of education, so as you can imagine, this is a very complex situation, and there are high levels of costs involved, and so therefore, these conversations are not the easiest of conversations. However, the education strategy for Stevenage is that yes, this school will provide future-proofing. It will provide future-proofing for not only this site and the natural birth growth rate, but also for the existing residents within Stevenage, because again, primary schools have preference areas and catchment areas, although we're not allowed to use the word catchment anymore. They have areas of parent preference. So that will ultimately change the dynamic of where parents choose to send their children to school. But by having a school site on the site, it's a really key bonus for not only for the development, but for those residents that live there, because it means they don't have to get in the car. There are on-site trips available. So it's not self-sustaining, because you'll never be able to get 100% self-sustaining, but you will get people that will walk to the school rather than get in the car, which is the key premise of this. Otherwise, the nearest school is about a mile away, and if you've got children in the rain, you will get in your car. So having something on site is a key bonus to that. In terms of secondary education, there will be some minor capacity within the first 2 years of the construction process. The Department for Education has recently supported the demolition and redevelopment of the former Barn Release school campus. That is intended to open in September 2023. The yield arising from this development won't start building until around September 2022, and so therefore there is some capacity within existing schools to accommodate those first occupiers, but obviously by the time you get to anywhere near the peak of demand arising from this site, the school will be open. And again, this is something which we've worked long and hard on with not only us but Stevenage Council and North Herts Council, because it's part of the same education planning area. And so those discussions have been arduous at times because things are always a moving feast, especially when you get the Department for Education involved and they start saying, no, we've got a different plan to yours. So they have been interesting conversations, but as I say, we've managed to secure a strategy which works for all three authorities. We are, on that note, we are seeking, as part of the recommendation for this application, we're seeking the delegated authority to make changes to conditions and to the Section 106 heads of terms, and also how some of the conditions may be worded in order to make sure that there is flexibility over quick development, and also to make things usable and practical when it comes to actual construction management side of things. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny, and thank you very much to the Highways officer who helped us as well. Just before I move on, can I just check that answered your question, Councillor Jones, at the end?
It did answer my question. Sadly, it did. If I can comment on it, it's very sad that over £1.3 million will not be going to the NHS for acute care. It's absolutely disgraceful. We've had this before, of course, as members will know, on other applications. Why that can't be justified? I mean, this development is going to bring in probably 1,500 new residents. So the Lister Hospital, for instance, will have to service. Well, hopefully they never have to, but they'll have to be prepared to service those patients, and that'd be much needed funding. We know how much the NHS is stretched, and the fact that there we are, we could have had 1.3 million going towards it. That would be costed in with Pigeon. When Pigeon sell this site with outline planning to a house builder, all those costs would be built into it. How that can't be justified just because there isn't a specific project. It's the running costs of the NHS. It really is soul destroying.
I think perhaps I might just comment on behalf of this committee and indeed the previous DM committee that the point you make about the NHS is, I think, common to every member of this committee. We are very disappointed that the NHS doesn't rise to the challenge sometimes at all, or at least better than it does. And you're right to note it, and we should note it through this meeting this evening, not for the first time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Andrews, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Chairman. Maybe there's a piece of work to be done, but talking to the NHS and getting an understanding. I had an understanding a little while ago of how they were challenged with people to actually sit down and do these negotiations, but they need to. I think they need to explain it to us. I just wanted to come back quickly, if I may. Lanterns Lane still concerns me. Looking at the local member, I wonder if there's anything we can do to properly establish what the current usage is before the site is opened, and whether or not we can put something in place to ameliorate the situation with rat running. I don't know if we're able to contact the satellite navigation organisations and ask them very nicely to take it off their system, as it's not suitable. So, you know, there may be other things we can do, but certainly it'd be extremely helpful to know what the current traffic is, and then we'll have a good idea once we've got that through. I did pick up that officers were very comfortable with the idea of looking at the GP provision figures. When you look at Simmons Green, it is 2.5 times further away from the site than the other practices mentioned. And clearly, you know, other than by car, it's not an easy or straightforward journey. And if you consider you'd have to go into the centre of town, change bus, get out onto another bus and go out there, and then repeat the process coming back and go into Boots to get your pills, you know, it's quite a kerfuffle. I'd rather see the money split more equally amongst those that are that much closer and therefore more likely to serve the residents of this particular development. But I'm comforted by what I hear from officers. Perhaps we could have some feedback on the Google thing.
Councillor Redfern.
Yes, I was just wondering about the lane, the traffic problem. The Hertfordshire Highways gentleman over there has said that perhaps something could be done with the signage. Why does that need to wait until after a problem has emerged? Why cannot the signage be put in ahead of any problem to say something like one track road, passing points only? I have seen that elsewhere to discourage relative strangers from going down there in the first place. Thank you.
I think it was Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I think building on those comments, the Lanterns Lane problem seems to be an existing problem. It's not one that will actually just arise because of the development. I was pleased to hear, however, that Section 106 money is going to be available for the improvement of the Gresley Way A602 junction, and I wonder if the Highways Committee, if the Highways officers think that this is likely to help, in that the best way to avoid a rat run is often to make it more attractive to go down another route. My other comment is on Simmons Green, in that although that is some way from the new development may put pressure on local surgeries, which mean other people in other locations may shift to Simmons Green. So I think it would be reasonable to view Stevenage as a whole in that respect.
Councillor Huggins.
Thank you again, Chairman. I wanted to ask the officers, we heard from the representative from Pigeon that they thought the site was going to be a net biodiversity gain. I know we're not assessing against that yet with the planning framework, but whether or not officers believe that is actually the case on this site. And I wanted to ask about, Jenny will remember from our site visit, the concerns members had with the crossing point and whether or not we were going to look at that becoming traffic light controlled as well as the junctions. And just lastly, Chairman, sustainable transport and the habit forming. I was just wondering whether the site is going to be phased in a way that the spine road can open as soon as possible in order for bus services to travel through the site so that the habit forming is there as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's one more question, I'll take it down. You're hovering, Councillor Crystal. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've obviously focused on Lanterns Lane, but I understand that there are concerns of other rat runs emerging, Whiteways, and further north. And there's mention, I think, of monitoring, ongoing monitoring. Is that going to be done on all of those routes as a matter of course, or is it going to depend on new evidence emerging? And will it be possible to take action on those routes as well if there are problems emerge?
Jenny and or other officers?
I'll answer the ones that I can answer. And that's actually about not about Lanterns Lane. I'll leave that to Oliver in a few moments. It's regards to biodiversity. So a calculator has been undertaken, biodiversity impact assessment calculator, which is in accordance with our policies within the district plan, and that does show that there is a net gain to biodiversity. What I would say is that the biodiversity calculators don't actually cover all aspects of the scheme. So they don't cover things like residential gardens, which, as we know, have a higher diversity of species and flora within them, and that's not covered within the calculator, but yet still the calculator does show a net increase. And you're right that yes, there isn't legislation in place at the moment to support us insisting on 10%, which is, we know it's coming, we know it's on its way, so at that point then we'll be able to make those judgments. Obviously, with it again being an outline application, whatever legislation is in place at the time the next applications come in on the reserve matters details, there will have to then probably no doubt be a change to make sure that we are capturing all of those elements moving forward with whatever the best practice and the guidance is at the time. In terms of the crossing point over Gresley Way, Aston 4, yes, we discussed that, and part of the rationale for having members on site was so that you could see for yourselves. Actually, it's not a pleasant route to try and run across. The visibility is not great. Therefore, whatever we can do in terms of improving that particular crossing point can only be an improvement. So we have spoken with highways officers and with the applicant as well. There's all manner of ways you can design a crossing point. One, of course, which would include signals. By having signals, you are going to have another pause in the traffic. So what we'd have to do if it was to be a signalised junction is to make sure that those traffic lights would then be optimised with the nearest traffic light. It would be at the Whiteway junction and the Uplands junction further north. So that way you would then, it would time to trigger when those crossing points are stopped, or it would be on demand. And so by being on demand, it's like 20 seconds waiting time at most. So in terms of the overall traffic delay for vehicles moving along Gresley Way as a result of another set of traffic lights, it'd be a minimal wait, a minimal change, and nothing which would then trigger somebody to go, do you know what, I'm not going to sit there for 20 seconds whilst somebody occasionally may cross the road on a demand-based approach. So yes, we are looking at that again, and that will become part of the conditions. There is a condition proposed in there already, which is talking about highway works in consultation with the right people to make sure that whatever design that junction is operates effectively. And again, as soon as you introduce horse riders into the equation, you're looking at something with a bigger footprint. You're looking at something with gates and things which corral horses into a separate section away from walkers and cyclists. So we have to be careful about what that design will be. So I can't sit here and say right now what that design will be. There'll have to be some detailed designs drawn up, and then, as I said earlier, something which is subject to some sort of forum approach, I think is a good way forward to make sure that we are capturing the views of those that use it regularly. In terms of sustainable transport, early delivery of the spine road and the pedestrian and cycle routes, that is one of the key principles of having the detail of the spine road and the access points in now, rather than the whole site being an outline. So that provides the skeleton and the detail against which all the rest of the site will then hang. It does also mean that that site the spine road and the accesses can be delivered independently of waiting for the detailed design of the residential properties and the community buildings. And that's why I think there's going to have to be a little bit more sophistication in the way some of the conditions are drafted, just to make sure that we can really nail that down so that it can be independent of other things. At the moment, the conditions kind of lump things together a bit. So that's why we're seeking delegated authority to make some changes, practical changes in that regard. We're also talking about having not the shelters themselves, but the locations of the bus stops also in as the Spine Road goes in, so that residents can clearly see where their bus stop's going to be. And again, that's part of that kind of, oh yeah, there will be one just there. I'll use that when it comes through. In terms of the transport modelling, we'll probably move on to Oliver in a moment, but there is a condition proposed within the application report, which does set aside, it does say that we will have to develop a strategy. And again, the strategy will have to be something which is carefully considered, looks at the most appropriate locations and appropriate mechanisms for monitoring, because we know that with vehicle technology and vehicle detection technology, how you monitor something will be very different moving forward. So as things change and as time progresses, whatever we do in terms of monitoring will also have to develop along with that. So I'll introduce Oliver again to talk about some of the other aspects of Lanterns Lane.
Thank you, Jenny. I think with Lanterns Lane, as has been acknowledged, there is an existing issue with some run traffic, and also, of course, the intrinsic problems of the single-track road and the passing places. It can be looked at the moment. There could be some signage improvements, regardless of whether this development comes forward, and that could be dealt with upon request by county councillors as part of their highways locality budget. If they wish us to pursue that, they can allocate some funds towards developing a scheme and implementing it. So I think that's all I have to say on Lanterns Lane. I think the other point was about the A602 Gresley Way. That is a substantial improvement to a signalised junction. For me, that is a big positive of this scheme. It will deal with a capacity issue that's made worse by the development, but it will be a benefit to the community as a whole. I think that's all I have to say, unless I fail to address some specific points.
Can I just come in? I think there was a question from Councillor Crystal, which was in relation to various rat runs. We talked specifically about Lanterns Lane, but do you want to just try and address Councillor Crystal's comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's exactly right. The issue of walking has also been raised as a rat run, and I've read communications by a number of residents and also the Parish Council representative on this point. For example, walking could potentially be used to access Cambridge, for example. There is potential for that to happen. Of course, there's nothing stopping people from doing that. There are existing issues on Walking High Street we all know about. It's very congested in the peak hours. So the way the applicant did the distribution was to look at census data in the surrounding ward on Gresley Way, and they looked at the places where people are most likely to work. And for example, if someone wants to go to Cambridge, just to give one example, that could use walking, the quickest route on the journey planner would be via the A1 and A505. We accept, of course, there will be some vehicles that are going to use walking as a rat run, but as the sensitivity testing suggested, this would be in the peak hours in the single figures. So we don't feel that's going to be a material impact and something that we can ask the developer to mitigate. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny. Yes.
The only other point that Councillor Crystal raised was about the White Way. The White Way is largely residential distributor road, and it also has a number of priority passing points. I don't know the technical term for them, but actually the time saving is negligible, whether you choose to go down the right way, face an oncoming bus, face an oncoming priority, several priority passing lanes, there is no gain to be had by using that route compared to Gresley Way because of the way that the traffic signals will be optimised. Again, you can't force people to take a defined route. You can advise them, and I think experience will tell them that it's not going to be beneficial, but also people will take whatever they think is the easiest and quickest and most convenient route. But one of the principles for the decision to have the bus exit at that junction was, again, to then encourage people to have a different option. So if all cars could come out of that junction, they've got three options: the right way, turn right on Gresley Way and go up to Fairlands, or turn left on Gresley Way and go the A602 or Six Hills Way. By having the bus exit there, vehicles will come north and south of that junction, and again that will then, well, actually it's quicker just to carry on turning right and go up Fairlands, because that's actually quicker and closer junction than turning left and going up the right way and taking a meandering route through. Obviously you can't legislate against all people taking any manner of options, but the package of measures that we've put together on this application we think is the right approach. It balances the needs of sustainability. It balances the request from local residents to minimise the number of junctions on Gresley Way. It also means that we have safe junctions that give priority to traffic moving along Gresley Way. It allows the signals to be controlled if necessary to meter the flow of cars coming out of the development site, to make sure again that you're meeting your monitoring targets in terms of trip generation leaving the site. And also, by having junctions on Gresley Way, it means that those leaving Uplands, Chalkdown and the White Way and Lanterns Lane have a safer opportunity to get out. I mean, even doing site visits ourselves, we noticed trying to turn out of Chalkdown onto Gresley Way, again, is not safe. So by having breaks in the traffic caused by signals, that will again make some of those journeys quicker and easier for those that need to. But the package of measures includes off-site cycleways, on-site cycleways and on-site pedestrian footpaths. And the whole strategy behind the interior layout and design, which again is not fixed at this point, but is indicative and illustrative, is to have a very well networked route within the site, footpaths and cycleways with direct access into and within the site as well. And those routes will be along greenways, will be along tree-lined avenues. So again, it's all about encouraging that modal shift, encouraging people to take those options, and about giving them those opportunities to take those options, rather than to make it nice and attractive, high-speed traffic, high-speed roundabouts, and it's easier to get in the car, isn't it? So we do know that people will drive, but we need to give them the opportunity to make other sustainable choices as and when we can. And I think the package of measures for this site do achieve that.
Thank you.
Point of order, Chairman, please. Yes. I believe, if I heard it right, and I welcome the officer's remarks, but I believe Councillor Crystal's question was, is there going to be monitoring after the site is done, in case what you've modelled is wrong, it can be put right later?
Absolutely, yes. And so the condition and the 106 will be very detailed in that regard. We've done it on a number of other strategic sites as well, where you have a period of monitoring. We can define that through negotiations for however long we think it should be there. That monitoring, as I said, we don't know the technology that will be in place, so that will have to be an evolving thing. So again, we won't set that in stone right now and say, oh, it's got to be ANPR because that might have issues, or it's got to be manual vehicle counts because that might have issues and things might change. We know that Bluetooth, for example, is a key part of the monitoring tool. But there will be monitoring based around the site, because obviously how do you then assign trips to that development? So there'll have to be a way of monitoring vehicles leaving the site to work out where their destinations of travel are going to be. And so there is, I say, a need and a condition within the report which says that they have to do that. They have to develop a monitoring strategy, and as part of that monitoring strategy and travel planning strategy as well, which there'll have to be travel plans for all the residential properties, the commercial elements and the care home and school. They'll all have to have travel plans. All of that, again, it's a part of the package. Will then, if you exceed the trip generations and the trips that you've assigned and done your estimations for, if you exceed those, then we are seeking a remedial fund. We don't normally do that because normally the traffic assessments are done on a worst case scenario anyway, so you don't normally expect to ever reach or exceed those targets. But as part of future proofing and being sensible, we are seeking to make sure that there's remedial funds set aside. And those remedial funds aren't for traffic enhancements or capacity enhancements. They are going to be for specific sustainable transport measures. So again, whether it's more active engagement and encouragement programs, whether it's an individual that visits each property and says, how can you change your patterns of behaviour, and all those sorts of things. So again, we can't be specific right now what that monitoring will be, but the idea is, and the requirement is, that there will be a need to have a detailed monitoring strategy with identified locations and all the likes that you'd need to have, and flexibility to make sure that can change over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Now, from the last round, I think I had one hand that went up that didn't get caught, so that's Councillor Beckett. Councillor Andrews' hand, I think, has also gone in the upwards direction, so you'll come after Councillor Beckett, David.
Thank you, Chair. Virtually every representation against the development, or with issues regarding the development, all cite the number of access points onto Gresley Way. I've had a quick look, and from the roundabout at the top by the Showman's site down to the bottom Spine Road, it's about 1.6 kilometres. We've currently got 3 access points, plus potentially, if things go in a certain direction, a signalled pedestrian crossing. And I just wish, whilst we have highways here, to take their professional opinion on it, whether removing, say, the central bus right-way access point and widening, say, the bottom one to make it a joint bus and traffic, whether that would have an impact in terms of traffic flow. And also, my other concern is, if we're getting people to stop and start all the way down Gresley Way, and we signalise or don't signalise the pedestrian crossing, whether that could actually increase the danger to people crossing that road at that point.
Thank you, Councillor Beckett. Councillor Andrews, yes?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a couple of things to wrap up, if I may. On page 9841, broadband, we still seem to, after discussing this for several years, we still seem to be hedging round what it is we actually want in terms of broadband. And given that there's a number of offers out there, our officers at some stage able to come forward telling us what the latest tech is and what we should have. I'm thinking in terms of definite fibre to premises at this stage, but it may well be we've gone beyond that. But I do think that, saying shall include a programme of method of delivery, high-speed broadband, blah, blah, can we not be a bit more specific? Or could we, at the detailed phase, concentrate on that to make sure we've got it? If we then go to page 104, I get a bit confused. At several of the master planning sessions, I made comments about the attenuation of surface water being concentrated on, and I pointed out that the bottom of the hill is the beam, which desperately needs water. And if we were going to attenuate water, could we do it on site in that bottom corner, and then make sure that, having been suitably treated, it was passed into the beam? I then go to 104, where I see, and officers have probably got this from the water company, but it's located within the groundwater protection zone of Sawbridge Pumping Station. Well, there's a pumping station at the bottom of Ford Lane. There's a pumping station down at Frogmore. There's a pumping station. There's pumping stations everywhere. Nowhere near Sawbridgeworth. Why are we worried about Sawbridgeworth? It's got 2.5 valleys. It's got to get through the Ash Valley to get to Sawbridgeworth. Where the hell are we? I think we're about 4 valleys out here.
I must say, isn't it refreshing to see that Councillor Andrews has now got a new thing to get himself attached to? Pumping stations. It's very, very good.
Does anybody else have anything to say? I'm getting around the loop 2 or 3 times now.
Yep, Councillor Kemp.
I think it's been a very useful and valuable discussion, and very grateful to the officers for responding to all the various questions that we've brought up. They do largely seem to have been points of detail, and I think I'm still bearing in mind that this is a site which is in the district plan as having permission for 600 or more houses. and that has been ratified by the Secretary of State. And does the proposal actually meet the district plan? It seems to me that it does, and it seems to me that the promoters and the council officers have been working together well to address the various concerns that have been rightly raised. And I think we see this in areas around the highways and, for example, the third access becoming bus only. And I think I would commend the officers and the promoters for working together towards this.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. So I think you've got officers, I think you have one round of questions. You can decide which of your team deals with which question. Jenny, is it going to be you? Yeah?
Yes, I was just saying a minor conflab on how we deal with the broadband and fibre. I wish I could tell you what the technology will be. I'll put some shares into it. But I don't know what that technology will be. But in terms of the generic phrase that we use, we do prefer to use the word broadband because that covers all manner of options. It will be fibre to the premises because, to be quite frank, no house builder would like to build a property without such provision these days. So they have done in Brunsford, yes, before we got our policies in order. Yes, and running water. So yeah, that is we do tend to use the generic phrase for broadband. In terms of pumping stations, water attenuation, the strategy is, and it's part of the landscape strategy and part of the drainage strategy, which the detail has been provided, even though it's an outline application. The drainage strategy incorporates SUDS, sustainable urban drainage systems, throughout. It's one of the key principles of the landscape-led scheme is to have the existing landscape tree belts and landform utilised to make sure that there's natural drainage flow. There'll be a number of attenuation ponds and infiltration ponds through the site, so that way you have a set number of treatments. So with any highway, for example, and with surface water, you need a set number of treatments in order to make sure that the water is filtered and cleaned before it is then naturally discharged into the beam. So that is definitely part of the strategy for this, and the conditions do require the detail to be as per what has been agreed with the lead local flood authority. And again, that's something which will come through in detailed design as well when it comes to looking at the specifics of each green space in each area in due course. I think that's about it, I think. Oh yeah, there's the sewage web. I was just trying to see if I could get the Environment Agency comment. It may be a cut and paste from theirs or mine, I'm afraid. Yeah.
If you whip it out for the next round.
Absolutely.
Jenny, Councillor Beckett's question, which went to the accesses. Yeah? Yes,
the access points. We have been on the loop on the access strategy. We know that Herts Highways quite rightly informed us actually that if it was one access, it wouldn't be sufficient. If it was two accesses, yes, you could do that. And actually, what the provision of the bus exit does is it does become two accesses into the site. We have looked at again the specifics of, we haven't looked at the specifics of widening, but we have looked at the location and the options of whereabouts the bus route should go. I wonder if Oliver might be able to expand on some of those conversations.
Thank you, Jenny. As it's been said quite a few times, we have three access points on Gresley Way. However, it really is only two all movements access points. The access from the White Way access is a sustainable access, and it's used simply for egress of buses, which there could be up to five buses an hour in the peak hours, and pedestrians and cyclists. So, as Jane just said, we need a minimum of two accesses for this development of 618 homes. The developer has responded to that, and I should say that in January 2019, the developer did have three all movements access points, which we recommended against to have the White Way sustainable access. So the flow of traffic will be less than what the free flow of traffic, it may be less impeded than people think, because there'll only be a very limited number of movements out of the right way. I think one of the councillors also alluded to connectivity. In my opinion, the development is very well connected for pedestrian and cyclists. All the 3 access points are toucans. We have a connection at the south of the site into right-of-way 104 under Gresley Way. And we also have the package of pedestrian and cycling improvements on Gresley Way itself. So I think pedestrian and cyclist safety is satisfactory in this development, and it's to a good standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, officers. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands rising, so I think we've reached that time. We have in front of us application 319-0118 OUT. This is important to keep in mind, I think. This is a hybrid application. It's for 1, planning permission for construction of the Spine Road, site accesses, drainage, infrastructure and ancillary works, and then 2, for outline planning permission for the erection of up to 618 homes, primary and preschool, up to 1 80-bed care home and up to 50 assisted living homes, neighbourhood hub comprising shops, community facilities, travelling show people site, public open space, landscaping, drainage infrastructure, all associated and ancillary development at land at east of Stevenage off Gresley Way, Stevenage. The recommendation is that the application be approved. Do I have a proposer? Yeah. Councillor Jones, thank you very much. Do I have a seconder?
What is he proposing?
You are proposing, I take it, that the application be approved as it's presented.
I am proposing that yes, as it's presented there. I was just going to add that what I found most important about this application, and I think it's the first one that I've certainly ever seen, the fact that it's landscape-led from the beginning. I think that's what swung it for me. So I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Right, thank you very much. And I think we need a seconder. Councillor Kemp, thank you very much. So we have a proposer and a seconder for the application as presented, which is hybrid. All those in favour?
Clear show of hands. All the way up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
It's 9. All those against? There's some maths here. Is there an abstention? Oh, that's it. Well done. Okay. So in that case, that application is approved, and permission for this hybrid application will be granted.
Thank you. Stay back.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Just go and find him.
And might I also, just on behalf of the committee, and indeed I think everybody in the public gallery, whether you're in favour or against this application, thank the officers. Thank you to officers from county who've come along this evening to be here. Clearly a lot of work has gone into this application. I thought, Jenny, we're conscious that you spoke at length, and thank you for that as well. Thank you.